Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Naranam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudinaya Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12, today we are starting next chapter, chapter 9. Markandeya Rishi sees the illusory potency of the Lord. Text 1 onwards. So yesterday we studied how Markandeya Rishi performed such a wonderful tapasya, and Kamdev even tried to break his tapasya, he could not. Then Narayan themselves appeared, and Markandeya Rishi welcomed them, glorified them, and now he's going to further ask some benedictions. Sutuvacha sansuto bhagwan nitham markandeyena dhimata narayano nara sakha prita aha brigudvaham. Sut Goswami said, the Supreme Lord Narayan, the friend of Nara, was satisfied by the proper glorification offered by the intelligent sage Markandeya. Thus the Lord addressed that excellent descendant of Bhrigu. Shri Bhagwan Uvacha Bho Brahmarshi Varyo Asi Siddha Atma Samadhina Mai Bhaktyana Painya Tapaswadhyaya Samyama. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Markandeya, you are indeed the best of all learned Brahmins. You have perfected your life by practicing fixed meditation upon the Supreme Soul, as well as by focusing upon me, your undeviating devotion service, your austerities, your study of the Vedas, and your strict adherence to regulative principles. Vayam te paritushtasma tvad brihad varta charyaya varam pratich bhadram te vardo asmi twadipsitam. We are perfectly satisfied with the practice of lifelong celibacy. Please choose whatever benediction you desire, since I can grant your wish. May you enjoy all good fortune. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the Lord used the plural form in the beginning of this verse. We are satisfied, because he was referring to himself along with Shiva and Uma, who will later be glorified by Markandeya. The Lord then used the singular, I am the bestower of benedictions, because ultimately only Lord Narayan or Krishna can award the highest perfection of life, which is eternal Krishna consciousness. Some technical things. Sri Rishiruvacha Jitamate Deva Devesha Prapannartir Harachita Varena Tavatalamno Yad Bhavam Samdrishyata. The sage said, O Lord of Lords, all glory is to you. O Lord Achyuta, you remove all distress for the devotees who surrender unto you. That you have allowed me to see you is all the benediction I want. Grihitva jadayo yasya Srimad Padabja Darshanam Manasa Yoga Pakvena Sabhavan Me Akshi Kochara. Such demigods as Lord Brahma achieved the exalted position simply by seeing your beautiful lotus feet after their minds had become mature in yoga practice. And now, my Lord, you have personally appeared before me. So Markandeya Rishi points out that exalted demigods like Lord Brahma achieved their position simply by glimpsing the Lord's lotus feet. And yet Markandeya Rishi was now able to see Lord Krishna's entire body. Thus he could not even imagine the extent of his good fortune. Athapi ambuj patraksha punya shloka shikhamani drakshay mayam yaya loka sapalo veda sadvidam. O lotus-eyed Lord, O crest jewel of renowned personalities, although I am satisfied simply by seeing you, I do wish to see your illusory potency, by whose influence the entire world, together with its ruling demigods, considers reality to be materially variegated. Why would After seeing the Lord, Markandeya Rishi had this desire to see Maya, to see illusory potency of the Lord. It's just unimaginable. A conditioned soul sees a material world to be constituted of independent, separate entities. Actually, all things are united, being potencies of the Supreme. Markandeya Rishi is curious to witness the exact process by which Maya, the Lord's bewildering potency, casts living beings into illusion. Sutvacha, iti dito architah kamam, rishina bhagwan mune, tatheti sasmayan pragad, badharya ashramishvaraha. Sut Goswami said, O wise Shaunak, thus satisfied by Markandeya's praise and worship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead smilingly replied, so be it, and then departed for his hermitage at Badrika Ashram. The words Bhagwan and Ishwar in this verse refers to the Supreme Lord in his incarnation as a twin sages, Nar and Narayan. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Supreme Lord smiled ruefully because he prefers that his pure devotees stay away from his illusory energy. Curiosity to see the illusory energy of the Lord sometimes develops into sinful material desire. Nonetheless, to please his devotee Markandeya, the Lord granted his request. Just as a father who cannot convince his son to give up pursuing a harmful desire may let him experience some painful reaction so that he will then voluntarily desist. Thus, understanding what would soon happen to Markandeya, the Lord smiled as he prepared to display the illusory potency to him. His Maya is very, very strong. We'll see that. Tamev chintayan artham rishi swashram evasa vasannagniyarka somambu bhuvayo vyadatmasu dhyayan sarvatra cha harim bhavadravya rapujayat kvachit pujam visasmar prema prasara samplutaha. Thinking always of his desire to see the Lord's illusory energy, the sage remained in his ashram, meditating constantly upon the Lord within fire, the sun, the moon, water, earth, air, lightning, and his own heart, and worshipping him with paraphernalia conceived in his mind. But sometimes, overwhelmed by waves of love for the Lord, Markandeya would forget to perform his regular worship. It's apparent from these verses that Markandeya Rishi was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Therefore, he wanted to see the illusory energy of the Lord, not to fulfill some material ambition, but to learn how his potency is working. Tasya ekada bhrigu shreshta pushpa bhadra tate mune upasinasya sandhyayam brahman vayuran hun mahan. O Brahman Shaunak, best of the Bhrigus, one day while Markandeya was performing his evening worship on the bank of the Pushpa Bhadra, a great wind suddenly arose. Tam chanda shabdam samudiriyantam balahaka anva bhavan karala akshasthavistha mumuchustadidbhi swananta ucharabhi varshadhara. That wind created a terrible sound and brought in its wake fearsome clouds that were accompanied by lightning and roaring thunder, and that poured down on all sides torrents of rain as heavy as wagon wheels. Tato vyadrashyanta chatu samudra samantata kshamata lama agrasantaha samira vego mebhir ugra nakra Mahabhayavartag Gabhir Ghosha. Then the four great oceans appeared on all sides, swallowing up the surface of the earth with the wind-tossed waves. In these oceans were terrible sea monsters, fearful whirlpools, and ominous rumblings. Antar vahishad bhir dyutivi khara kshat hrida bhi rupta pitam jagat Chaturvidham Vikshya Sahatmana Munir Jalaplutam Kshamam Vimana Samatrasat. The sage saw all the inhabitants of the universe, including himself, tormented within and without by the harsh winds, the bolts of lightning, and the great waves rising beyond the sky. As a whole earth flooded, he grew perplexed and fearful. So here the word Chaturvidham refers to the four sources of birth for the conditioned souls: embryos, eggs, seeds, and perspiration. So everything was getting inundated. Whole earth was flooded, and so he was afraid. Tasyavam udvikshat urme bhishanaha prabhajana gurni tavarma haranavaha apure mano varashad bhirambuddha Shimame pidhad dvip varsha dribhi samam. Even as Markandeya looked on, the rain pouring down from the clouds filled the ocean more and more, until that great sea, its waters violently whipped into terrifying waves by hurricanes, covered up all the earth's islands, mountains, and continents. Sakmantariksham sadivam sabhaganam trailokyamasit sahasdigbhiraplitam sa ek evur varitum mahamunir babhram vikshipya jata jadanvadhavat. The water inundated the earth, outer space, heaven, and the celestial region. Indeed, the entire expanse of the universe was flooded in all directions, and out of all its inhabitants, only Markandeya remained. Means everybody else died. His matted hair scattered, the great sage wandered about alone in the water as if dumb and blind. Can you imagine in that kind of water? He was the only one swimming around, now don't know what to do, where to go. And this water wasn't just like a pond or a river, the whole universe was flooded. Shutrit parito makarastimingala ubdruto vichin bhasvasutahata tamasya pare patito brahmandisho navedakam gam cha parishrameshitaha. Tormented by hunger and thirst, attacked by monstrous makaras and timingala fish, and battered by the winds and waves, battered by wind and waves, he moved aimlessly through the infinite darkness into which he had fallen. As he grew increasingly exhausted, he lost all sense of direction and could not tell the sky from the earth. Krachin magno mahavarte tarlastaditah kvachit yado bhir bhakshate kvapi swayamanyo anya ghatibhi. Kvachit chokam kvachin moham kvachit dukham sukham bhayam kvachin mrityum avapnoti vyadhyadi dhirutarditaha. At times he was engulfed by the great whirlpool, sometimes he was beaten by the mighty waves, and at other times aquatic monsters threatened to devour him as they attacked one another. Sometimes he felt lamentation, bewilderment, misery, happiness, or fear, and at other times he experienced such terrible illness and pain that he felt himself dying. Ayutayat Varsharam, Sahasrani Shatani cha Vyatiyur Brahmastasmin Vishnu Maya Vritatmanaha. Countless millions of years passed as Markandeya wandered about in that deluge, his mind bewildered by the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He asked for it. So his mind was completely bewildered. I mean, he was doing fine in his ashram, doing his bhakti, his tapasya. Even Kamdev could not bewilder him, but he asked to see Maya. Sa kadachit brahmastasmin prithivya kakudi dvija nyagrodha potam dadrishe fal pallava shobhitam. Once while wandering in the water, the Brahman Markandeya discovered a small island upon which stood a young banyan tree bearing blossoms and fruits. Pragutarasyam shakhayam tasyapi dadrishe shishum shayanam parana putke grasantam prabhaya tamaha. Upon a branch of the northeast portion of that tree, he saw an infant boy lying within a leaf. The child's effulgence was swallowing up the darkness. So that's the painting in the backdrop. Mahamarkata Shyamam, Shrimad Vadan Pankajam, Kambu Grivam Mahoraskam, Sunasam Sundar Bhravam, Shwase Jadal Kabhatam, Kambu Shri Karna Dadimam, Vidrum Madhar Bhasesh Chona Yit Sudhasmitam, Padma Garbha Runa Pangam, Hridya Hasavalokan, Shwasaj Swashad Dwale Samvigna, Nimna Vid Lodara, Charvangil Bhyam Panibhyam, Unniya Charanam Bhujam, Mukhe Nidhaya Viprendro Dhayantam Viksha Vismita. The infant's dark blue complexion was the color of a flawless emerald. His lotus face shone with the wealth of beauty, and his throat bore marks like the lines on a conch shell. He had a broad chest, a finely shaped nose, beautiful eyebrows, and lovely ears that resembled pomegranate flowers, and that had inner folds like a conch shell's spirals. The corners of his eyes were reddish like the whorl of a lotus, and the effulgence of his coral-like lips slightly reddened the nectarian, enchanting smile on his face. As he breathed, his splendid hair trembled and his deep navel became distorted by the moving folds of skin on his abdomen, which resembled a banyan leaf. The exalted Brahman watched with amazement as the infant took hold of one of his lotus feet with his graceful fingers, placed a toe within his mouth, and began to suck. Only Krishna can perform this pastime. The young child was the Supreme Personality of God. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Krishna wondered, so many devotees are hankering for the nectar of my lotus feet. Therefore, let me personally experience that nectar. Thus, the Lord, playing like an ordinary baby, began to suck on his toes. And in fact, when we go to Jagannath Puri temple, main temple, in the courtyard of that temple, there is a Akshavat, they call it Akshavat, that's a Vatvriksh. And they say this is the same Vatvriksh. Either the same or it came from the same roots that Markandeya's Rishi saw Lord Krishna sitting on. So Jagannath can do anything, no doubt about it. Tad darshanadvita parishramo muda prota full hrita polma vilochanam bhujaha prahrishta romadbhut bhava shankitaha prashtum purastam prasasara balakam. As Markandeya beheld the child, all his weariness vanished. Indeed, so great was his pleasure that the lotus of his heart, along with his lotus eyes, fully blossomed, and the hairs on his body stood on end. Confused as to the identity of the wonderful infant, the sage approached him. So Markandeya Rishi wanted to ask the child about his identity and therefore approached him. Tavit shorve shvasitinena bhargava swanta sharira mashko yatavisha tatrapi yado nyastamachashta krishnasho yatha puram uya tadiva vismita. Just then the child inhaled, drawing Markandeya within his body like a mosquito. There the sage found the entire universe arrayed as it had been before its dissolution. Seeing this, Markandeya was most astonished and perplexed. So Krishna, he just inhaled, and he inhaled everything, even including Markandeya Rishi within his body. And in his body, Markandeya Rishi saw the entire universe. What's so difficult? He can show the entire universe within his mouth to Mother Yashoda. So in his whole body, he can show the entire universe. Kamarodusi Bhaganan Nidra Bhaganan Adri Sagaran Dvipan Savarshan Kakuba Surasuran Vanani Deshan Sarita Purakaran Ketan Vrajana Shrama Varna Vritaya Mahanti Bhutanyat Bhautikanyasho Kalam Cha Nana Yug Kalpa Kalpanam Yat Kanchit Tanya Dvaya Vihara Karanam Dadarsha Vishwam Sadivava Bhasitam. The sage saw the entire universe, the sky, heavens and earth, the stars, mountains, oceans, great islands and continents, the expanses in every direction, the saintly and demoniac living beings, forests, countries, rivers, cities and mines, the agricultural villages and cow pastures, and the occupational and spiritual activities of the various social divisions. He also saw the basic elements of creation along with their byproducts, as well as time itself, which regulates the progression of countless ages within the days of Brahma. In addition, he saw everything else created for use in material life. All this he saw manifested before him, as if it were real. Himalayam Pushpavaham Chatam Nadim Nejashramam Yatra Rishi Apashya Vishwam Vipashyan Chavitstat Shorveh Bahir Nirasto Neapatlaya Badho. He saw before him the Himalaya mountains, the Pushpabhadra river, and his own hermitage, where he had the audience of the sages Naranarayana. Then as Markandeya beheld the entire universe, the infant exhaled, expelling the sage from his body and casting him back into the ocean of dissolution. Tasmin prithivya kakudi prarudam vatam cha tat parna pute shayanam tokam cha tat prema sudhasmitena nirikshito apanga nirikshanena Athatam balakam viksha netrabhyam dhishtitam hridi abhyayad ati sanklishta parivakshaptum adhokshajam. In that vast sea, he again saw the banyan tree growing on a tiny island and the infant boy lying within the leaf. The child glanced at him from the corner of his eyes with a smile imbued with the nectar of love, and Markandeya took him into his heart through his eyes. Greatly agitated, the sage ran to embrace the transcendental personality of Godhead. Tavatsa Bhagwana Sakshat Yogadhisho Guhashe Antaradadarishe Sadhyo Yatehanisha Nirmita. At that moment, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original master of all mysticism, and who is hidden within everyone's heart, became invisible to the sage, just as the achievements of an incompetent person can suddenly vanish. The achievements of an incompetent person. So see, to hold the Lord, to touch him, it's just impossible for materially conditioned souls. Although Markandeya Rishi very, very much exalted, but still the Lord just disappeared. Tamanvat vato brahman salilam loka samplava tirodhai kshanadasya swashrame purovat stitaha. After the Lord disappeared of Brahman, the banyan tree, the great water, and the dissolution of the universe all vanished as well. And in an instant, Markandeya found himself back in his own hermitage, just as before. So thus ends the purport of 12th canto, 9th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Markandeya Rishi Sees the Illusory Potency of the Lord. So he saw the whole dissolution. And he went inside the body of Krishna and he saw the whole universe, all the elements, all the creation taking place. And then he came out again and then he found himself back in his ashram. as if nothing had happened. It was just like a movie. But he was inside the movie. He was inside the ocean. This is Krishna's Maya. And the same thing happened. We read the story of when Lord appeared as Madan Mohini. So she distributed the nectar to the demigods, and demons did not get anything. And Lord Shiva wanted to see that form. Krishna said, don't you desire? No, I want to see that form. He didn't want to see Maya, but he wanted to see Krishna as the most beautiful woman. And Krishna appeared as a Madan Mohini, and even Shivji was bewildered. This is a special relationship between the Lord and his devotees. But anyway, lesson for us is we should not pray to the Lord. We want to see Maya. We just want to serve him. That's all. So we can start chapter 10. Lord Shiva and Uma glorify Markandeya Rishi. Tutuvacha sa evam anubhuyedam narayana vinirmitam vaibhavam yoga mayaya sameva sharanam yayo. Sud Goswami said the Supreme Lord Narayan had arranged this opulent display of his bewildering potency. Markandeya Rishi, having experienced it, took shelter of the Lord. Shri Markandeya Vacha Prapanno Asmi Angri Moolam Te Prapanna Bhayatam Hare Yana Mayayapi Vibuddha Muyanti Jnana Kashaya. Shri Markandeya said, O Lord Hari, I take shelter of the souls of your lotus feet, which bestow fearlessness upon all who surrender to them. Even the great demigods are bewildered by your illusory energy, which appears to them in the guise of knowledge. Conditioned souls are attracted to material sense gratification, and thus they meticulously study the workings of nature. Although they appear to be advancing in scientific knowledge, they become increasingly entangled in their false identification with the material body, and therefore increasingly merge into ignorance. So what Markandeya Rishi understood, and he took shelter of lotus feet of the Lord. Sutuvacha Tamevam nibhritatmanam vrishena divi paretan rudranaya bhagwan rudro dadarsha swaganera vritaha. Sud Goswami said, Lord Rudra, traveling in the sky on his bull and accompanied by his consort Rudrani, as well as his personal associates, observed Markandeya in trance. Athoma tamarishim viksha girisham samabhashata pashyemam bhagwan vipram nibhritatmendriya yashayam. Goddess Uma, seeing the sage, addressed Lord Girish, My Lord, just see this learned Brahman, his body, mind, and senses, motionless in trance. Nibhrito djhash vrato vata paye yatharnava kurvasya tapasa sakshat samsiddhim siddhido bhavan. He is as calm as the waters of the ocean when the wind has ceased and the fish remains still. Therefore, my Lord, since you bestow perfection on the performers of austerity, please award this sage the perfection that is obviously due him. So wonderful to go through this pastime of Lord Shiva on Shivratri day. Sri Bhagwan Uvacha Nevethyatya Shishakvapi Brahmarshir Moksham Apyatan Bhaktim Param Bhagavati Labdhavan Purushe Avyaye. Lord Shiva replied, surely this saintly Brahman does not desire any benediction, not even liberation itself, for he has attained pure devotion service unto the inexhaustible personality of Godhead. The words Navechati Ashisha Kvapi indicate that Markandeya Rishi was uninterested in any reward available on any planet within the universe, nor did he want liberation, for he had achieved the Supreme Lord himself. Athapi samvadishyam bhavan yeten sadhuna ayam hi paramo labho drinam sadhu samagamaha. Still, my dear Bhavani, let us talk with this saintly personality. After all, association with saintly devotees is man's highest achievement. Sutvacha iti yuktva tamupeyaya bhagwan sasatam gati ishana sarva vidyanam ishvara sarva dehinam. Goswami said, having spoken thus, Lord Shankar, the shelter of pure souls, master of all spiritual sciences, and controller of all embodied living beings, approached the sage. Tayoragamanam sakshadishyor jagadatmano na vedaruddhati vrittir atmanam vishwamevacha. Because Markandeya's material mind had stopped functioning, the sage failed to notice that Lord Shiva and his wife, the controllers of the universe, had personally come to see him. Markandeya was so absorbed in meditation that he was unaware of either himself or the external world. Bhagwan Sadavigyaya Girisho Yoga Mayaya Avishat Tad Guhakasham Vayushchadram Iveshvara. Understanding the situation very well, the powerful Lord Shiva employed his mystic power to enter within the sky of Markandeya's heart, just as a wind passes through an opening. So Lord Shiva, what's difficult for him? Atmanyapi Shivam Praptam Tadit Pinga Jadatharam Trayaksham Dash Bhujam Pransham Udyantam Eva Bhaskaram Vyagra Charmambaram Shula Dhanurishwa Secharma Bhi Akshamala Damaruka Kapalam Parashum Saha Vibhranam Saha Sabhatam Vichaksha Hridi Vismita Timidam Kut Eveti Samadher Virato Mani. Markandeya saw Lord Shiva suddenly appear within his heart. Lord Shiva's golden hair resembled lightning, and he had 3 eyes, 10 arms, and a tall body that shone like the rising sun. He wore a tiger skin, and he carried a trident, a bow, arrows, a sword, and a shield, along with prayer beads, a damaru's drum, a skull, and an axe. Astonished, the sage came out of his trance and thought, who is this? Where has he come from? Because Markandeya Rishi was meditating on the Supreme Lord. And all of a sudden he saw Lord Shiva in his heart. Netre unmilya dadrishe saganam somayagatam rudram trilak guru nanama shirsa muni. Opening his eyes, the sage saw Lord Rudra, the spiritual master of the 3 worlds, together with Uma and Rudra's followers. Markandeya then offered his respectful obeisances by bowing his head. When Markandeya Rishi saw Lord Shiva and Uma within his heart, he immediately became aware of them, and thus also of his own individual self. During his trance, on the other hand, he had simply been absorbed in the awareness of the Supreme Lord and had thus forgotten himself as a conscious perceiver. Tasmai saparayam vedadhat saganaya sahomaya swagatasan padyardya gandhasrag dhup deepakaya. Markandeya worshipped Lord Shiva along with Uma and Shiva's associates by offering them words of wisdom, sitting places, water for washing their feet, scented drinking water, fragrant oils, flower garlands, and arati lamps. Ahatvatmanubhavena purna kamasya te vibhu karvam kimishan yenedam nirvratam jagat. Markandeya said, O mighty Lord, what can I possibly do for you, who are fully satisfied by your own ecstasy? Indeed, by your mercy, you satisfy this entire world. Namah Shivaya Shantaya Satvaya Pramridaya Chaya Rajo Jushe Athaghoraya Namastubhyam Namo Jushe. Again and again I offer my obeisances unto you, O all auspicious transcendental personality. As a Lord of goodness, you give pleasure. In contact with the mode of passion, you appear most fearful, and you also associate with the mode of ignorance. Sutuvacha evam sutta sabhagwan adi deva satam gati paritushta prasannatma prahasanstama bhashata. Sud Goswami said, Lord Shiva, the foremost demigod and the shelter of the saintly devotees, was satisfied by Markandeya's praise. Pleased, he smiled and addressed the sage. Now, Sud Goswami said, Shri Bhagwan Vacha, Varam Vrinishva na kamam Vardesha Vayam Traya Amogham Darshanam Yesham Martyo Yad Vindate Amritam. Now here, Sud Goswami says Shri Bhagwan Vacha. So Lord Shiva, now he's not Supreme Personality of Godhead, but as we have studied in Srimad Bhagavatam, even for Narad Muni, Shukdev Goswami said Shri Bhagwan Vacha. He called him that way. Because they're not Purna Bhagwan, Purna Purushottam Bhagwan, but they have the potency of the Lord. And Lord Shiva being a great Vaishnava, great devotee, and does so much of services for the Lord. He has so many potencies of the Lord. Not in full. He's not Vishnu Tattva. He has his own Tattva, Shiva Tattva. But he comes close. He comes very close. And nobody can, we are all Jiva Tattvas. We cannot even come to that level of Shiva Tattva. We'll remain Jiva Tattva always. Right now we are conditioned, so whenever we get liberation or whenever we get to be in the spiritual world, still we remain as Jivas. We don't become Vishnu Tattva, we don't become Shiva Tattva. So Lord Shiva has his own special category. So he can be called Shri Bhagwan, but also it is at the best of the demigods. So we should know what his real position is. Of course, he's very, very exalted. Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu, he is the best of the Vaishnavas. So that way we should always, we can worship him, take shelter of him, and ask him for a benediction of Krishna's service. So Lord Shiva said, please ask me for some benediction, since among all givers of benedictions, we three, Brahma, Vishnu, and I, are the best. Seeing us never goes in vain, because simply by seeing us, a mortal achieves immortality. Brahmana Sadhva Shanta Nisanga Bhutavatsala Ekanta Bhakta Smasu Nirvaira Samadarshina Saloka Loka Palastan Vandanti Archanti Upasate Am cha Bhagavan Brahma Swayam cha Harir Ishvaraha. The inhabitants and ruling demigods of all planets, along with Lord Brahma, the Supreme Lord Hari, and I, glorify, worship, and assist those Brahmins who are saintly, always peaceful, full of material attachment, free of material attachment, compassionate to all living beings, purely devoted to us, devoid of hatred, and endowed with equal vision. Nate maya chuteja cha vidharman api chakshate natmanascha janasyapi tad yushman vayamimamihi. These devotees do not differentiate between Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, or me, nor do they differentiate between themselves and other living beings. Therefore, because you are this kind of saintly devotee, we worship you. Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are respectively manifestations of the creating and annihilating potencies of the personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Thus, unity exists among these three ruling deities of the material world. One should not, on the basis of the modes of nature, find material duality within the ruling potency of the Supreme Lord, although that potency is manifested in three divisions as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So of course, they are three different personalities, but they are not different in the sense, first, they are the Gunavatars, Lord Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu, and secondly, ultimately, they are all spiritual. But they just have different functions to perform in the creation. Na hiyam mayani tirthani na deva chetano jita te punanti rukalena yuyam darshana matrataha. Mere bodies of water do not constitute holy places, nor are lifeless statues of the demigods actual worshipable deities. Because external vision fails to appreciate the higher essence of the holy rivers and the demigods, these purify only after a considerable time. But devotees like you, purify immediately just by being seen. So he is glorifying Markandeya Rishi. Brahmanebhyo namasyamo niyasmad rupam trayimayam vibhrati atma samadhana tapa swadhyaya samyamah. By meditating upon the Supreme Soul, performing austerities, engaging in Vedic study, and following regulative principles, the Brahmins sustain within themselves the three Vedas, which are non-different from Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, and me. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto the Brahmins. A pure devotee of the Supreme Lord is considered the most elevated of Brahmins, since all spiritual endeavor culminates in the loving service of God. So this is how Lord Shiva holds the Brahmins in a very high position. Brahmins or Vaishnavas, devotees. Devotees are Brahmins. Shravana darshanadvapi mahapatakinum api vah shuddheran anantya jaschapi kimu sambhashanadibhi. Even the worst sinners and social outcasts are purified just by hearing about or seeing personalities like you. Imagine then how purified they become by directly speaking with you. So how he's glorifying Markandeya Rishi. Sutuvacha iti chandra lalamasya dharma gayopa brahmitam vacho amritayanam rishir natripyat karnayo piban. Sud Goswami said, drinking with his ears Lord Shiva's nectarian words, full of the confidential essence of religion, Markandeya Rishi could not be satiated. Markandeya Rishi was not eager to hear himself praised by Lord Shiva, but he appreciated Lord Shiva's deep realizations of religious principles and therefore desired to hear more. Sachiram Mayaya Vishnu Bhramita Karshito Brisham Shiva Vagamrita Dvasa Klesha Punjastam Abravit. Markandeya, having been forced by Lord Vishnu's illusory energy to wander about for a long time in the water of dissolution, had become extremely exhausted. But Lord Shiva's words of nectar vanquished his accumulated suffering. Thus he addressed Lord Shiva. So Markandeya Rishi had desired to see Lord Vishnu's illusory energy and had suffered extensive miseries. But now in the person of Shiva, Lord Vishnu again appeared before the sage and relieved all his suffering by imparting blissful spiritual instructions. So now Shri Markandeya, he will address Lord Shiva. So I guess we can stop here. Let's take this up tomorrow. See anybody has any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisance. I just saw the mercy of Lord कि अर्चना माता जी ने बोला मुझे शिव जी के बारे में सुनना है और शिव जी की कथा आ ही गई कैसे भी
वाकई में माता जी
या थोड़ी सी आ गई
थोड़ी सी आ गई
हमारे तो बहुत है प्रभु जी
हरि बोल हरे कृष्ण
हरि बोल
Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्ण थैंक यू प्रभु जी थैंक यू
Thank you, Madam. Chalo, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
हरे कृष्ण